I'll just keep my phone on silent. Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Sneha, and I welcome you all to the sixth episode of this series. And this is titled as The Invisible Spouse. And now, when I say the sixth episode, I can't even imagine that already 6 months have passed down, and I'm doing these series on a regular basis. And this allows me to feel a sense of gratitude towards the work, towards this entire realm of intergenerational trauma and healing. And at the same time, it allows me to feel immense joy for the journey I have taken. And this topic is very close to my heart. I have been married for 15 years. I never had a relationship before. So my partner was the first person with whom I was involved in any way, whether it is emotionally, physically, or romantically. And it was an arranged marriage. So I simply didn't know at that time what marriage truly meant because I was always into academics, being an overachiever, always upgrading myself with new content, new courses, and skills. So this field of, this entire relationship setup was very foreign to me. And I entered the marriage within 3 months of my courtship. I mean, the courtship wasn't a courtship of the kinds. It was like back 15 years back then, like when you didn't have your personal mobile phones as well. So I simply didn't know the person whom I was getting married to. My marriage was not of a regular, normal marriage in the sense that the moment I got married, I stayed with my in laws for 1 full year while my husband lived in a different city. He used to come on weekends. And since I lived in the joint family setup with my in laws, there was no privacy. There was no space to be myself or to even feel like how a wife would feel. And my husband being brought up in a joint family setup, he simply didn't had any clue of how to take care of the better half. I mean, after 8 months of my marriage, I went with him for the first time to go to a movie, and that too because there was no one at home. And he was getting bored, so he said, Chalo movie chalte hain." And that is how I ended up going to the movie for the first time with him. I don't even remember when I had taken a meal with him. I simply do not have any memory of that, going to a restaurant, which seems very normal in a relationship. All these things were never in my life. I never experienced them. And I was the first one to get married in my entire friend circle. So again, there was no reference point of what is considered to be normal and not. Though I lived in a joint family setup, but they were like uh, three mother-in-laws. And then one of my jithani, and she had a life of her own. So I thought she's an exception because I and my life was compared to my mother-in-laws who were dating back to a different generation altogether. And since they didn't go out, it is perfectly normal for me not to go out. Since they don't do this, it's perfectly normal for me to do this. So, like, there was no reference point as well. And there were times when my husband used to visit on weekends, and if we got some time to talk, I would ask him, let's go. And he will just shun me that why can't you adjust in a joint family? He would never take me out. And all this while, I started taking things very personally. And he would also tell me that you don't have this in you. You're not that appealing. You're not that attractive. And all those comments, I took it by heart. I made it all about myself. That yes, probably I'm not that good looking. Probably I don't know how to adjust in a joint family. Probably this is more about me. And I will keep on proving myself again and again, again and again. only to face that same reaction or only to get the same narrative from him. And this cycle of proving myself again and again allowed me to reach the depths of depression. I was on antidepressants for a good 6 to 8 months. I only had the washroom privileges wherein I wasn't even allowed to lock the washroom door because I would collapse anytime. And again, I made it about myself. The medication had a side effect because of which either I will sleep continuously or I will just have this frequent bouts of extreme anger. And again, I made it about myself that, because I'm angry or I just keep on sleeping, I'm not doing anything. That is the reason why my marriage is not working. And then there was a considerable amount of time which had been spent in this entire part. And then I used to get comments from my in-laws and the so-called family members that, it is because you are not conceiving, that is why things are happening this way. And in India, especially in Marwari families, whatever the problem is, the solution is have a child. If your marriage is not working, have a child. If your husband is irresponsible, have a child. And from that space, from that extreme pressure, I conceived. My conception again was not normal, not because I had some fertility issues, but my husband had. And he knew it from the very beginning of our marriage. And probably that was the reason why he withdrew from me. And he again blamed me for the same. And I conceived my child. My son was a preterm. He was born in the 8th month and his survival was very low. So my entire time and focus was on ensuring that he survives. And then I just became a mother. And if I tried to become a wife, I was shunned and judged and shamed and, called by different names. So I again went back to the mother, being a mother. However, this was not working in favor of my son because now my son started, who was just 3 months or probably as he grew up till 3 years of age, he ensured that I am happy, which was a heavy responsibility for a child to carry. But I didn't know it then. I was too naive. I was too much into my own narratives. And then my husband had to shift again to his and relocate, and then we were away from the family. And then I conceived again. Again, this time it was not a planned conception, my second child. Yet I wasn't willing to go through that abortion process, and therefore I continued with the pregnancy. However, my husband wasn't ready. And all these, thoughts that ek bar bacha ho jayega, everything will be fine and all. This crap was so much instilled in me that I chose to continue with the pregnancy despite having a chaotic house. And all of this again took a toll on my second born, who was again birthed after a very difficult pregnancy. So now when I see my house today, even though I am a therapist, I work in this lens of intergenerational trauma, I can see the fragments of all the trauma which I have knowingly or unknowingly passed down to my children. And it was only in 2019 when my younger son was 2 years, or probably in 2020 beginning, when my younger son was just 2 plus, and I was howling at them and screaming at them. And me and my husband were fighting or on some petty issue, like always. And my kids were like, Chup ho jao, mama, quiet, quiet, don't shout. My elder son was like literally holding his ears and saying, my ears are paining, my head is paining. But none of us, neither me nor my husband, wanted to just, shut up. We were like at the tip of our anger and we were bursting out like anything. And then my younger one, he just crawled over me and he pulled my hair so that I can hold him because he was feeling so unsafe in that chaos, in that fight. But I was so angry that I literally took him and, I just shooed him away. And he fall from the bed. I was sitting on the bed and he fall from the bed. And fortunately, at that time, since the kids were younger, we used to put mattress on the floor and he landed upon the mattress. But I didn't even realize it then that I had thrown him and he could have got hurt, like brutally hurt. I didn't realize it then as well. I was so angry. And 2, 3 days later, when I was going through that same sport and I hurt myself and my knee started bleeding, it was that moment I realized that shit, what I had done. My son would have bled to death. And that was the time I realized that it wasn't about my spouse, it wasn't about my children, it wasn't about my circumstances, rather, it was about me. And this extreme anger which I am facing inside. And that was the time I decided to take healing on a serious level. And then I hired my one on one therapist. By that time, the moment I entered this space with my therapist, I had considered this as the normal that, husband wives keeps on fighting. This is every house story that, once the kids are born, the entire focus is on the kids. And that is how it is should be. All these things were so deeply ingrained in me that I thought that this is how a normal life is supposed to be. And when I started this healing journey, I was forced to look beyond what is at the moment, what I thought was the truth. Because in my mind, my truth was that I am a victim. Because my husband is not listening to me, because my children are not listening to me, and I'm overexhausted and tired, and that is why I'm angry. But I never saw anything beyond this until and unless I chose to heal. And when I chose to heal, many insights showed up for me. And I will list them down. Probably that will help you to understand how we are not shaped by our present circumstances, how our internal feelings goes beyond what is on the surface. So my parents were married. Again, it was an arranged marriage, which was out of a compromise because my mother wasn't handicapped and my father was uneducated. And therefore, when two people who are insufficient in their own capacities, who have this sense of not being enough in their own lives, when they too get married, the child born from that union is going to have that multiplied effect of being insufficient. I was the first living child of my mother, and there were two miscarriages before me. So the kind of space I entered in the womb was all filled with this fear of what if I lose. As a fetus itself, I soaked into this feeling of my mother that what if she doesn't stay? And this fear is so much inside me till date, though I'm just better aware of it now, that I will keep on thinking that people will leave me, people will die, and I will be left alone. And from that space, and this fear was that primal reason why I kept on overgiving, why I kept on holding on to so tightly to everyone I met, including my friends and my relatives and my in-laws. Like, I would become an overgiver to that extent that even people will say that, Sneha, you don't have to do this much. But this fear of losing people was so strong inside me that I could not stop myself from overgiving. And the result, which is often associated with overgiving, is one, resentment, because you cannot receive and you always feel that you are not reciprocated enough. Second is that constant burnout and exhaustion, because you keep on violating your own boundaries, you keep on disrespecting your own body. You are always available for the other person. And this resentment and this burnout together creates the deadly mix of deep rage within, where a part of you truly wants to, shake up the other person and tell them that, you don't do this, you do this. And the other part is so much into this fear that what if I lose them? And then in this mix, in this push and pull, there is no space for love at all. And I was in this space since the time I was birthed. And for good 22 years, I got married at the age of 22. And for good 22 years, I had built this muscle. So when my partner came into my life, I was already brewing in this space where I was struggling to be seen, where I was wanting to be seen and appreciated because I was doing so much in every space of my life. And yet at the same time, I felt that no matter how much I do, it's not enough. And then again, I will push myself to do more, going into that vicious cycle and projecting all that resentment on my partner. It is not that he wasn't at fault, he was, but it's not about him, it's about my felt sensation, which I wasn't able to see before I chose to heal. The third was, and when I was brought up, my dad was the primary bread earner. And my mom, since she was a handicapped by birth, and she had this inferiority complex, whenever I would ask her something as a child, she would always say, Papa se baat karenge. Talk to your father. And from this space, I understood as a child that if you earn money, then only you are the decision maker. If you don't earn money, you simply do not have any say. And I started rejecting this part of my mother unknowingly, unconsciously, by having big dreams, big ambitions, so that I will not spend a life like my mom. I started belittling her in my own internal landscape because I thought that if I will earn enough, I will have that respect in the house, which my mother doesn't have, in my opinion, as a child. And the more I rejected her at the conscious level, at the subconscious level, I became like her when the time came for my marriage. Despite being highly qualified, highly educated, I chose to prioritize my family over and over again rather than prioritizing my career. Despite having money, and this is true till date, that despite earning money, despite having money, whenever my kids ask me something, I always say, Papa se baat karte. So the more I rejected my mother and saw things as her failures, as her flaws, I integrated them in my life to an extent that even after being trauma informed, even after being well aware of how my behaviors are functioning and what are my coping mechanisms, yet those become my by default patterns. And that is what happens when you reject either of your parent. You essentially merge with them. I also saw a lot of fights between my mom and my dad. The fights were not violent, but there were definitely heated exchange of words. And my father was an man of a huge temperament where he would get angry and he could say anything in his anger. Though as a child, I started, feeling that why Papa is always so angry. Yet at the same time, I understood that this is given. A man could be angry. A man could say anything they please. And it is okay. It is for a woman to understand because woman is the peacemaker of the house. This is what I have seen upgrowing. This is what my grandmothers used to do. And no matter how much we train ourselves that we should not accept narcissism and all those fancy words, but when the moment comes, I eventually become the peacemaker of the house. I eventually shut myself up and see when everything calms down, then only I would speak up. Because this is so ingrained in me. This has been taught to me. This has been what I've absorbed and observed in my environment. And I became that. And the more I judged my father, or the more I accepted him, that it is okay for a man to shout, to be loud, to be not considerate at times. And it is the man who goes out and works hard and earns money, and therefore he has all the right to disrespect people because everyone else is just sitting in the house. The more I bought into this narrative, I eventually invited a similar man in my life. Today, practically, me and my husband earns similar amounts of money. Sometimes my earning is more than him. Yet, this unconscious narrative is so strong that I choose him to be the decision maker. Even if I'm spending my own money, I have this urge to ask his permission. When he is struggling with his emotions, I just try to reason myself that maybe he has a hard day at work. Maybe he is having many certain issues in the office, or he is going through certain kind of issues or tensions. And I remind myself that I sit at home. How would I know what he goes through? I mean, despite being psychoeducated, the point what I want to make here is that even though cognitively we know a lot of things, what works in a relationship, what doesn't work in a relationship, how we want to be treated in a relationship, how we don't want to be treated in a relationship, the felt sensation is very different. We almost all the times accept certain behaviors because that feels natural to us. It is only when someone else points that out, we realize that, okay, this is not normal. But since it feels natural to us, we don't see it from a different lens. And that is what happens. Because my father was very strong opinionated, I became a proxy spouse for my mom. I will tell my mom, it's okay, mom. Let's go. Let's do something which will make you happy. Or I will buy little gifts for her to ensure that she feels good. I didn't know when I stepped into my father's shoes and tried to become a husband for my mother so that she could be happy. I didn't even realize when I became a proxy spouse for my father as well. Now I distinctively remember the events when I was just 12 or 14 and I started learning cooking. I used to compete with my mom in my emotional landscape, in my internal landscape, that I had made a better vegetable or a better gravy than my mom. And when my father used to appreciate, I would feel a sense of pride. I didn't even realize when my father used to go for business trips, I started taking out his clothes and telling him, Papa, this looks good on you. This doesn't look good on you. I didn't even know when I shifted from being a daughter to become a proxy spouse for my father as well. And the effect of it, which it had on my present relationship, was that because I was so available and so much of a proxy spouse, both for my parents, that I could not be a present spouse for my partner. Though I did everything, I used to take care of him. I used to prepare meals which he would like. I used to take care of his cupboard and practically everything, organized everything. But internally, I was not into him completely. And he was just showing me the mirror that, look, this is how you are. And this is what happens, that it is very easy for us to blame our partners because blaming allows us to be a victim. Blaming allows us to play small, and this allows us to, receive sympathy from people which we mistook as love. Because throughout our childhood, we have been so unseen in all our relationships that even little sympathy feels like love, little appreciation, little pity from other people. Oh, you do so much. He's so lucky to have you. Just these small lines makes me feel that I'm loved. At least someone is seeing. I am not ignoring the flaws which my partner had. I'm not ignoring the stories and the narratives which he brought into our relationship or what he did into our relationship. I am not ignoring any of these. However, what I am pointing out that what I am bringing into this relationship, not only consciously, but also unconsciously. And this is not only from my parents, it is coming from generations beyond, where each of my grandparents and their parents, everyone had this notion that a woman is supposed to adjust. A woman is supposed to make a man happy. A woman is supposed to do everything to keep the house together. And these narratives live in my DNA. And even though I become a modern woman, feminist at my core, yet the felt sensation when it comes to my own relationship is very different. And therefore, coming to your own truth is very important. Today, I don't know what next step I'm going to take into my relationship, whether I'll choose to stay in my relationship or I would choose to walk out. But now I feel whatever decision I'll take, it will not be coming from the different stories which I have been carrying. Rather, it will be coming from my own truth of what I truly want in my life. And probably I haven't figured that out yet, and therefore I'm unable to take any step in any direction as of now. So, the stories which hold us, the narratives which hold us, the beliefs which hold us, or which we think about our partner, is often a reflection of what our mothers have felt for their partners, of what our fathers have felt for their partners, of how we as a child viewed our partners, our parents' relationship, and how that impacted us. I have clients who tells me that, when they were child, there were so many fights between mom and dad that they had to be the peacemaker. Mom would communicate with the dad through child, and the dad would do the same. And the child unknowingly became a messenger, and this messenger in their adult relationship became a person whose voice could not be heard, who simply didn't know how to say what they feel assertively. They will either withdraw and will give their partners silent treatment, or they will go into extreme aggression and saying things which they don't even mean. And therefore, when we truly want to be present in our existing relationship, we need to make that movement towards the same sex parent. Because if we make that movement and become the child there, stepping out of that proxy spouse role, we can truly be present in our relationship. But this journey is very hard because it allows you, and rather it forces you to demerge from one parent, which again creates a loss of identity. It allows you to view your parent without the lens of the other parent, because many times we view our fathers from the lens of our mothers. When we deroll from this lens, we essentially feel a void inside us because we have never actually truly experienced the other parent. And this place is so threatening, so scary, and so lonely that it's a journey in itself. And the more we do it, the more we acknowledge them as humans with their own flaws, with their own stories, we will find how we are deeply entangled with each of them. Each of the stories, not the parent, but each of their stories. We are so deeply entangled with them. And from that space, it is very difficult to come and be present in your relationship. It doesn't matter whether the relationship survives or thrives or it just dies down. It is about whether you are yourself in your relationship. Because when you're truly yourself, then only you can expect the other person to be seeing you for who you are. When you are not yourself, how would the other person see you? From this space, I invite questions and concerns and answers. And today I thought I'll do a mini constellation for few of you who are willing to step in and share their questions to see what is entangling you, what is holding you back to be yourself in your relationship. The floor is now open, and any one of you who would like to come and talk about it. Please unmute your devices, come on camera, and let's see what shows up for you.
So, Sneha, I would like to ask. So, like we discussed in the beginning of,
Right.
while others were joining, that okay, I didn't receive from the father, I didn't receive from the husband, and now as my son is becoming an adult, till he was not an adult, he was all out for me. But
Yeah.
now that he's becoming an adult, he's absent for me. He's not
And
contributing. He's not earning that he can really contribute. Okay, he's not earning as much that he can contribute, but it's like I am the boss, and just like my father was, my his father was, he's becoming the same. So what could be the reason for me to attract this pattern?
before I answer this question, I would like to give you some perspective that when it comes to your son, he is not supposed to be your partner. He is not supposed to be for you.
Correct.
Rather, you are the big one. You have to be there for your son. So essentially, probably this is because you are in this realm and you are working upon yourself, that your son is feeling free to move on in his life. However, when you say that he is just like his father, is because you rejected your father.
Okay.
Probably because you rejected your partner. And since as a child, he was deeply attached to you, like you said, that he was always there with me, for me. He has taken all those feelings of rejection which you have for your partner, and
Okay.
he's living those feelings. And since the parent you reject, you essentially merge, because you are essentially born from both sets of parents. Like your son is half of you and half of your ex-partner. And even though this part, the part which belongs to you, is so loyal to you that he wants to reject the other half, but he cannot, because he has come through him, he becomes like him. He literally becomes like him. And in his subconscious language, he tells his dad that, Dad, you are just not the bad guy here. I am just like you too. So here, if you truly want your son not to follow his father's steps, you have to drop this narrative, because what happened between you and your partner has led to your separation. But his father is not responsible in that, right? So that is the first perspective which I wanted to give to you. Now, coming back to your question, that what allowed me to invite such men in my life,
Hmm.
I want you to close your eyes for once and visualize your father and just see him coming towards you, taking steps towards you. And tell me, in your internal landscape, how far or close is he from you in terms of number of steps?
He's there. He's like right in front of me, not even an
Hmm.
arm's distance.
Hmm. And what is your felt sensation?
I'm happy
Hmm. Happy because?
because he's here.
Hmm. And now I want you to breathe into your body and feel where this happiness does not reach. Is any part of body not feeling this happiness?
Around the belly button.
Yeah. And now breathe into your belly button and go back to the first time when you felt that lack of happiness when father was around.
He was a busy man. He was always busy. He was traveling. He had a business.
Mhm. And when
So
the
yeah,
father was physically absent because he was traveling, what beliefs you formed?
that he's busy. He's going to be away.
Hmm.
And when he comes home, we're supposed to be quiet
Yeah.
because he's got his own stress and
Hmm.
he's been tired after a long day's work or a long traveling.
Hmm. And how was the felt sensation? What it allowed you to feel about yourself?
So for me, my father absence was always compensated by the gifts he got.
Hmm.
He used to get us a lot of reading stuff, a lot of books. We had video games even in those times, imported chocolates and all of that.
Hmm.
I mean, we were never short of anything but his presence.
Yeah. And what made you not demand his presence? Because you said that when he was around, we were supposed to be quiet.
My
Who
mother, my
told you?
grandmother,
Exactly. Now, do you understand that you were essentially viewing your father from your mother and your grandmother's lens? That you're supposed to be quiet, you're supposed to be adjusting. And it is okay if he is absent. And probably this is one of your, I'm not sure this is the only, but this is one of your inner child who believes that I have to adjust with a man who is not present. Because in my psyche, in my growing up years, this belief is formed that it is perfectly normal. I have to keep quiet. Does it make sense now?
Yeah.
And now, what will it take you to leave these stories to your mom and your grandmom?
I have no inhibition. I can just leave it.
So find this story living in your belly button, around your belly, and give this story a form, size, shape, or color and breathe it out. Breathe it out to your mom and grandmom and see what is the form of it.
Strangely, but I'm seeing red bangles.
Hmm. And what does those red bangles represent to you?
Marriage,
Hmm. And
wedlock.
probably, yeah, and probably these are all these beliefs which you have carried in your marriage unconsciously or subconsciously. And so, since you vibrated on those beliefs, you essentially invited a similar partner in your life.
See, now here there's a little confusion.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what, I mean, if those beliefs I would have really carried, my
Mm-hmm.
marriage would have lasted.
But you also evolved as a soul, Garima, right?
Not
You
when
are
I was
not.
going for my separation. No,
Mm-hmm.
it was purely out of infidelity, nothing
Yeah,
between us.
yeah. And again, the question comes back that it wasn't about you. It wasn't about you only. Like in the beginning, I said that I'm not ignoring the flaws and the beliefs which my partner brought into our marriage. Similarly, what void your partner brought into your marriage is not your responsibility. There must be certain void in his life which he was filling up through infidelity. And that void is not your responsibility, Karan. Like, even after doing this work and this immense amount of inner work, if my marriage is going to collapse, it's not my responsibility because I can only work on the things which I have brought into the system. And marriage is always about two equal partners. If my partner is not willing to take his equal responsibility, it's not going to work anyway. Even though you carried those beliefs, and probably that was the reason you endured this marriage or the pains which it brought for so long.
Hmm.
But your beliefs were vibrating for you, but probably your partner's void was much bigger than your beliefs.
Hmm, hmm.
And that is not your responsibility.
Got it.
Okay? Because when marriage happens, just like there is kundali matching, two traumograms are also matching. And just like in Kundli, one partner has some stronger planetary position,
Hmm.
which balances the other partner's life. Similarly, one trauma is so overpowering that
Hmm.
it simply subdues the other partner's beliefs.
Got it.
And therefore, it is about conscious evolvement.
Hmm.
And what will it take you, Garima, to free yourself from this unconscious responsibility which you are still carrying, that it was somehow about me? What will it take you to see your partner as an independent person who chose to fill his void because his void was taking a bigger toll on him?
Hmm.
And probably when you will see it from that lens, you will not make it about yourself. And so, to a certain extent, your rejection and your resentment will drop, which will again change the way you view your son.
Okay.
Okay? Does that help?
I'll ponder. It's a lot to
Yeah.
comprehend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can come back to the recording, especially this part, and probably go through it again.
So, are you want to share the recording with us, or
Yeah, yeah. I always share the recording with all the registered participants.
okay?
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to go ahead? Or who would like to share their stories or ask the questions? Know that this is a safe space. We are not going to judge you here.
I think I can go ahead.
Hi. Hi, Supra. Please go ahead.
So basically, I want to understand why my husband is not providing, even though my father was doing it for us, like as kids. So why is he absent completely?
Hmm.
I'm still unable to understand that.
Okay. And now, Supra, I want you to go and close your eyes and just feel into this feeling that what happens to you when your husband is absent, not providing for you, not providing for your children. What is the felt sensation?
Then I'll be alone.
Hmm. And if you just breathe into this sentence, I'll be alone, and go into the feeling. What is the feeling here?
Sadness.
Hmm. And breathe into this sadness, Supra, and see whose sadness is this, and the person whose this sadness truly belongs to is standing right outside the door. Mentally open the door and see whose sadness is this.
My mother's.
Hmm. And what is the story here?
It's keeping me safe.
Hmm. What is your mother's story? Why she feels this sadness?
Because my father is not there for her.
And now, can you truly see, Supra, that you are so merged with your mom and rejected your dad because you were seeing him from her lens, that you invited essentially the same partner in your life? The felt sensation is exactly the same as your mother. And in your own way, you are carrying her pain, her story. And since you rejected your dad, you are inviting a similar man in your life. And now, what will it take you, Supra, to view your father not from your mother's lens, but from an independent lens of your own? Because what is happening between your mom and dad is between a couple. And what would it take you to see your mom as an independent woman rather than a helpless woman who needs your support? What will it truly take you to become a child for her, become her daughter rather than being her support system, being her partner?
Not to parent her.
And this is again a journey, Supra. How are you willing, and to what degree are you willing to de-roll from this role of the parent which you are playing for her, to de-roll from the role of the spouse which you are playing for her, to de-roll from the role of a confidant which you are playing for her?
I'm ready to de-roll 100%.
Mhm. And just breathe into your body and see where are these parts located.
Chest and forehead.
And breathe it out. And as you breathe this out, breathe this various roles which you are playing for your mom, her partner, her friend, her emotional confidante, her support system, the shoulder on which she can lean on, her proxy spouse, her caretaker, her support system. And as you keep on breathing out all the different roles which you're playing for her, just to make her happy, know that whatever role you play for her, it is never going to be enough for her. And by playing those roles, you are essentially making that void bigger for her. And you are also overexhausting yourself in this process. And from this space, when you enter into your relationship, you're simply not there for your partner. You're burning into this resentment of not being seen, of not being enough, and you project that all on your partner. And from that space, and from his own conditioning and beliefs and the traumas which he carries, he rejects you more and more. So keep on breathing out the various roles which you're playing in your mother's life and create a boundary where you tell your mom that, Mom, whatever happens between you and your husband remains between you both. And I choose to become a child and a daughter of both of you. And I have nothing to do with what you share between you and your partner. And breathe these various narratives, various roles out. And as you breathe all of them out, now thank your partner for showing you the mirror, for showing what was unresolved in you. And ask him that I free you from the roles which you were playing in my life to bring me closer to my truth. And as you do that, and probably you have to do this supra multiple times in your internal landscape, and then see what shows up for you. Because until and unless you resolve what is behind you, you cannot resolve what is ahead of you. What is happening with you?
I can't see anything right now.
Hmm. What is the felt sensation in your body then?
I'm feeling calm.
Hmm. And know that, Supra, this is just one of the steps. You have to take these steps again and again, again and again, till the time you truly feel that you have freed your partner from being a mirror, from showing what is unresolved in you. Does this helps?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story here. Anyone else who would like to go ahead?
Hi, Sneha. I have a question.
Hi, Supriya.
Hi, Sneha. Thank you for sharing your experience. I think it
Thanks.
resonated a lot. I'm curious, again, of course, we've gone through examples of seeing how we can become the spouse for both of our parents in some
Yeah.
way, like you shared. And in that context, is it possible to be merged with both the parents in the sense that
Yes.
one is the actual act of merging, and in rejection of the other parent, you also somehow take on their
Yeah.
experience. So if we're more merged with both the parents, I'm curious what's the kind of movement that we need to really first recognize that this is happening, and second, owning our space as a child.
Right.
Uh, uh, And again, I think you did take us through the steps in terms of the experience inside the body that requires that movement to happen, where we give back the stories. But anything from your personal journey as well, in terms of how we're really
So,
owning our space.
one thing, it is a journey and it
Mm,
takes us a long time
mm,
because rejection is still visible.
mhm.
You can list down the negative traits of one of the parent, and from there, you can clearly see that the rejection is visible.
Right,
Whenever rejection happens, merging is followed.
right,
Because if love wouldn't be the factor, why would we even reject our parent at the first place?
right.
And since love is the only factor,
Mm-hmm.
we cannot separate from them. And
Mm,
therefore, we unconsciously merge with them. Merging can happen in body,
mm.
or it can happen in our relationships, where we invite the
Right,
similar kind of partner,
right.
or we go through the same experience, or we
Mm,
go through that felt sensation.
mm.
Okay. So when it comes to resolving, rejection and merging are easier to deal with
Ah,
when merging is followed after rejection. Okay.
mm,
Then it is easier to deal with because it is clearly seen. The patterns are clearly visible. Like Garimaji said, what made me attract similar kind of men? The pattern is
right,
clearly visible. And
right,
since I reject this, I clearly know it in my body.
right. Yeah.
So rejection plus merging is very easier to deal with compared to only merging because we
Mm,
simply don't know to what extent we have merged.
right. Yep.
And when demerging happens, it's like the way I shared that it feels like an identity crisis. We
Mm,
simply
mm,
do not know who we are.
mm,
And
mm.
therefore, the solution to both of these is again going back to those stories. Here I
Mm,
do a very consolidated form, but in my one on one, I expand these stories and
mhm.
take you to the every nook and corner of the story which you are replaying in your life. And
Right,
sometimes you need multiple visits to go to the same story.
right. Mhm.
And from there, each time you go, it's like, pieces of glass has been fallen on the ground. And each time you go, you pick up one piece of yourself and bring it together. Again, when you have the time and courage, you again go back and bring one piece and you fit it again, arranging and rearranging everything.
Yeah.
So, merging when alone, like in my mother's case, it was break and bond merging and slightly rejection plus merging. But break-in, bond, and merging took the major part.
Mm.
And in that case, it took me a great deal of work
Mm.
to really demerge from her, to
Right.
come to, and to be honest, I have not completely 100% demerged, but now I'm at a space that I'm consciously aware that how I am merging, because I've done that much of work, that now I don't need that entire process to demerge.
Right.
I can go through that without going through that entire process. So it will again take some time. However, to come to the answer, again, it is all about your felt sensation.
Mm.
If you're doing the work by yourself, it will take you probably much longer time because the pain will be too intense that you are forced to give up. The adult cannot come onto the scene. And therefore, it is always advisable to process these parts in a safe space where the other person can hold that pain for you and can allow that adult to enter and put it or contain that story inside you. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, if you would like to do it yourself, the certain steps could be, first of all, deal with rejection part.
Mm.
That is the easiest to deal with when you're doing self-work.
Right.
So see what are the negative traits or qualities in each of your parent.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And once you do that, then so there is an exercise which I have done in one of my sessions where I ask the client to draw their mother, draw their father, and write down all the negative qualities each one of them have, and then see what of these qualities are into you.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you, Alankrita. It was nice to have you here. And from that space,
Mm.
you find out. So, for example, I judge my father for being controlling. And I do feel, because my kids tell me that you are very controlling. I don't feel that I'm controlling, but my kids tell me, and again, my kids show me the mirror.
Right.
And then I question myself, how, in what different ways am I controlling? I sometimes ask my children, how are I controlling you? How do you feel that am I controlling you? And they will tell you that, you decide what time we should eat, we should sleep. And yes, I'm doing my motherly role, but the felt sensation of the child is exactly the same.
Right.
That I am being controlled. And from that space, if I question myself, why am I controlling? Then I come to my fear, because control is always because of a fear. And that fear is my children will not become the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And my parenting skills will be judged.
Right. Sure.
Right. And there I have merged with my father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Right.
again, when you do this alone, becomes very difficult. Asking the questions at the right point of time, it becomes very difficult. But still, if you choose to do the work on your own because of any reason, then address the rejection first. Because through rejection, what will happen is you will identify how you are merging. And from
Right.
that space, the next step to follow, like the body work,
Mm-hmm.
is then you follow and demerge.
Right. Right.
And
Which is what the movement of the story is in terms of
yeah,
what am I carrying from in my
and
body.
probably you will not be able to do the internal movement right after demerging.
Sure.
It may take you certain number of times to demerge to an extent that you can take one step internally.
Right.
Like Supra said that I'm willing to give it the story 100% because she has been working with me for a long time. So she knows how the adult self takes charge.
Sure.
So that comes from that space. But in that case, it is very equivalently important to bring her to that child part of her, which is still entangled in the story, because the adult is free, but the
Yeah.
child is not.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so going to that child is very important. So
Yeah.
despite, whether you use modality like intergenerational work, family constellation, or you do past life works, or even you do entity work, entity removal, foreign energy work, the key is always to go to that child part.
Yep.
which carried on that belief.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense. And of course, I'm training and all of that, so I know right now
Yeah.
with Gaurav itself. But it's what I'm hearing you say is that when even if the adult is not conflated with the stories, and there's been a movement away from those stories, and you have a different relating with your parents now,
Yeah.
the internal movement might need to happen, which belongs to the inner child, which still carries those
Yes.
stories of our parent in that way, from where
Yeah.
we actually began taking on that role.
True. Yeah. And that inner child is again that subconscious part of you. And
Yeah.
that is why you are feeling it in your body.
Yeah.
Like in
Absolutely.
Garimaji's case, if you will just see that she said, I feel happy because the adult has made peace with her father.
Yeah.
And then I have to ask her, where does this happiness does not reach in your body? Because that is probably the home of that inner child,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So as an adult, we may feel that we have done the
Made
distance,
the
but it
movement.
is not about the adult. It is about the various fragments of us doing that internal movement.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you, Sneha.
You're welcome. Yes,
Thank you.
Supra, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm updating you about this here. It's related to this only, somehow. So recently something had happened, and both my parents have stood up so strong for me that my fear is showing up now. What will happen next?
Yeah.
So my mother had stood for herself for the first time in her entire
Thank you.
life. So I can see that in my like external landscape also, the kind of work I'm doing. So I still trying to parent her by telling her कि ऐसे नहीं करो, please stop, because that fearful part of me is also
Yeah.
showing very strong कि कहीं कुछ गलत तो नहीं हो जाएगा, things like that. So now I can see the patterns also, and but I am happy both feminine and masculine has stood up. Like otherwise, my mother never stood for herself, and now she can. So it really made me happy. But somewhere I'm still parenting her, and I
And
can
you will
understand.
continue to do that. You will continue to do that until and unless you have resolved those parts of you, which
Right.
feels pity for mother.
Oh, yeah.
Understand, Supra, doing that work that I have demerged from my mother, it doesn't happen in one go. There are
Right.
fragments of one part of you, one version of you have demerged from the mother, but the other versions of you are still deeply entangled with.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Anything else? Okay. Thank you so much for your time and energy here. It was lovely to have you all. Thank you so much. Wishing you light and happiness.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you
Diwali,
so much.
everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
Diwali to you
Diwali.
too.
Happy Diwali,
Happy
guys.
Diwali, everyone.
Happy
Bye,
Diwali.
everyone. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.